All right, today we covered the basics of simple interest and compound interest. I'm going to go through the presentation. I'm not going to do absolutely every single problem because really it comes down to applying formulas for interest and compound interest. Depending on the situation, there's a formula to find what you're looking for. So really the key to these is just recognizing what formula you need based on the situation, right? Is it simple interest? Is it compound interest? Etc. And then plugging in the right information from the question and then applying the order of operations properly in order to figure out the answer. So it's really more of the devil's in the details kind of topic. It's not hard, it's just really easy to overlook something or put in a wrong number or put it in the calculator wrong, that kind of thing. So to start out with, we're looking at simple interest. Simple interest, the key to simple interest is that you're only paying interest on the amount that was borrowed. So if you're borrowing money at like a 5% interest rate, they're going to charge you 5% of what you borrowed. Typically, the simple interest is for less than a year, but if it goes more than a year, you're only going to ever pay an interest amount on that original amount. And so the way to calculate simple interest is with this formula right here. The I equals P times R times T. I being your interest earned, P being your principal amount or your present value. Those two are the same thing. That's another thing. They'll use a variable and they'll call it a few different things. Principal amount or present value means the same thing. The initial amount that you borrowed or the initial amount you invested, depending on the situation. The R is your interest rate. Remember, when you're dealing with percents, because they're going to give you a percent rate, when you're actually using it in an equation, you have to change it to a decimal. So you have to move that decimal place over 2 places, right? Or divide it by 100, whichever way you know to do it. And then T is your time in years. It's always in years. So if they don't give you a time period in years, you have to convert it to years. And we'll see that. So for example 1, right, James takes out a simple interest loan of $10,000 at a rate of 5%, then he needs to pay back in a year. So in this case, the principal amount that he takes out is $10,000, 5% is the rate, and the time is 1 year. So we would just plug in what we need, right? What they're asking us is how much interest will he accrue? So we're looking for I, right? They give us $10,000 for the principal, 5% for the interest, so that's the 0.05, and then 1 for the year, multiply through, our interest is $500. So it's pretty simple. Same thing here. She borrowed $4,000 at a 3% interest rate for 9 months. The thing that's a little bit different about this is, remember, your time should be in years. So if they give you months, right, you have to kind of put that in how many years that would be. There's 12 months in a year, so the time is 9/12. All right, 9/12 of a year, which I convert to a decimal because usually it just makes things simpler. If you have a big Mamma Jamma calculator like the TI-84, 84 plus, whatever, 83, where you have or anything really where you can use parentheses, then you could just do 4,000 parentheses 0.03 and then another set of parentheses next to that, the 9 divided by 12, and close it off, and you'll be fine. But if not, you want to convert it first to a decimal, that can be easier. And in that case, we would end up with $90. Okay? So if you want to pause, there's a your turn. You can try those, see what you get. I'm going to keep moving on and just show you here. Okay? That's what we got. This is how I got it. So if you got something different than I did, you might want to check those details. You might want to make sure that you converted your percent to a decimal properly, right? 2 places to the left. Want to make sure that you were dealing in years. Here, you had 10 months, you had 10/12. My recommendation here, 10/12 doesn't come out to be a nice terminating decimal like 0.75. It's like 0.83 repeating. You want to try to round as few amount of times as possible. So I would do the 10/12 first when you're putting in the calculator if you have to do it like this. If you have to do it in separate pieces. Do the 10 divided by 12. Don't round it off and then clear out your calculator and put it back in. Keep that number in there and then just hit times 0.085 times 2,000. Right? That way the true value is getting multiplied by these, and the closer you get to the most accurate answer. Okay? So if at any time your answers are a little off from mine, they're very, very close, but maybe the decimal point, like behind the decimal point, or some, tenths or thousandths off, it might be because you rounded. And I, when you put it in, or I didn't. Okay? So next is future value, right? The principal is known as present value, what it's worth up front. Future value is what it's going to be worth at the end, or the maturity value. That's another way they'll say it. It's basically, what's the actual value going to be at the end of the time period that we're looking at, right? Your present value, if you borrow $1,000, is $1,000. Your future value is how much you're actually going to be paying back, because you're going to be paying back $1,000 plus whatever interest they charged you to borrow that money in the first place. So that's your future value, or your maturity value, and they're going to represent with that variable A there for that. Okay, and our equation looks like this. These two are the same. Use this one, there'll be less work. This is like has an equation within an equation, right? If you have the interest, you have to do P times R times T, and then add by the P and all that. So this is pretty more straightforward. And we've got examples down here, right? They gave me the principal, the rate, the time, right? And they want me to find the maturity value, so I know I would use this equation as opposed to the I equals PRT, right? So I plug in my principal, right? The one just always stays there, my rate times my time, which they gave me in months, so I put it in terms of years, 9/12, and got 20,780, right? Remember, you got to do the multiplication here, so that you might want to turn that to 0.75, multiply it, then add the 1, and once you have everything in your parentheses done, then you multiply by the 20,000, all right? Making sure we got order of operations going. And then the interest paid would be 780, obviously, because if we borrowed 20,000 and we ended up paying back 20,780, our interest that we had to pay was 780. Okay, so if you're going to pause now, because I'm going to scroll down to the example, to the your turn problems. There they are. If you don't have what I have, you might want to recheck your equation, how you plugged it in. I have it there for you, so you can see what I did. Okay, moving on. I'm not going to go into great detail here. All right. So we talked about the present value. Let's say we don't know what the present value is. We want to find it. They tell us, oh, well, at the end, here's your future value. Here's what the whole thing's worth. And you want to figure out what you invested in the first place. That would be for this. So it says find the present value. So that tells you to use this formula right here, right? They give you the future amount of 7,500, and you're going to divide that by 1 plus R times T. So our rate being 6%, our time being 1 year. All right, so that one's pretty straightforward. If you're going to pause now, because there's a problem for you to do on the next slide. And there it is. In case you have trouble reading that, that's 86,829 and 27 cents. Okay, once again, 5/12 I don't think comes out to a nice decimal, so I would do that. And don't round it yet. Don't round it and put it back in. Just go ahead and multiply whatever value you get in your calculator by 0.06 first. Then add 1. Okay.